Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Colby Dickinson.
Hi, I'm Colby, and my group members are Chelsea, Gabby, Brendan, and Christian. We chose Chapter 6, which is the Mindful Listening chapter. I'm going to talk about the differences of hearing and listening. Hearing is a psychological activity that occurs when sound waves hit our eardrum, while listening is the complex process that consists of being mindful, physically receiving messages, selecting and organizing messages, interpreting messages, and responding and remembering. Listening is far more complex than hearing. Listening has psychological and cognitive dimensions that hearing does not have. Finally, mindfulness is being fully present in the moment. It's also what Anna Deere Smith in the textbook calls wide awake. When we are being mindful, we don't check our phones, we don't let our thoughts drift, or focus on our own feelings and responses. Instead, we tune in fully to the other person and try to understand what that person is communicating without imposing. Mindful listening involves taking the perspective of another, and it fosters dual perspective. Mindfulness is a choice, not a talent. You cannot learn how to mindful listen. No amount of skill will make you a good listener if you don't make a commitment to attend to the person fully. Therefore, effective listening begins with the choice to be mindful, and we must be involved with our ears, hearts, and minds if we want to listen effectively. Now, the rest of my group will cover pseudo-listening, monopolizing, selective listening and defensive listening, ambushing, and literal listening.
Hi, I'm Gabriella, and today I'll be talking about pseudo-listening and monopolizing. So in my first topic, pseudo-listening, basically pseudo-listening is when you're pretending to listen, but you're not actually involved in the conversation or paying attention to what the other person is concerned about or talking about. So my first point is going to be attentive. It seems like you're attentive. Sometimes you can be looking at them or you can be facing them, but at the same time you're not really involved, like I said before. The second point is going to be the cost that you take when you use pseudo-listening. The cost that you take in pseudo-listening is missing information. So sometimes they'll be talking to you, but because you're not involved in the conversation, you're going to be missing information. All this missing information can lead to a response that's a dead giveaway to pseudo-listening. So when you pseudo-listen and you respond, sometimes your responses can give it away. So someone may be talking about a class or a roommate, and a question that you ask or a comment that you make may have nothing to do with that topic, and that would be a dead giveaway to pseudo-listening. An example would be students in class. I think we can all relate. Sometimes when a teacher or a professor is kind of like boring, or we're listening to a lecture that we're not really interested in, we'll get on our cell phones, we'll get on our laptops, and sometimes it may seem like we're listening, but we're not really involved in what they have to say. My second topic is monopolizing. In monopolizing, monopolizing is when you try and take over a conversation, or when you're talking to someone else and you try and turn the conversation back to you. Then there are two ways to do this, two tactics. The first one is rerouting. Rerouting is when someone is talking and you interject or you bring the topic back to them. So you may not necessarily be interrupting them, you're giving them time and you're listening to what they have to say, but at the same time you're figuring out, how can I make this conversation about me? Okay, and the second way you can use monopolizing is by interrupting. So in interrupting, sometimes you'll interject or you'll say something in the middle of what they're saying, and these two can be used together. So you can interrupt and then reroute it, kind of like a cycle. Also, another point about interrupting is that interrupting isn't always a bad thing. So sometimes interrupting can be used to show interest, to voice support, and to ask for elaboration. So in monopolizing, interruption has a good and bad quality. In both of my points, are antithesis of good listening. So both of these are the opposites of what good listening is. In this one, you're going to be missing information. You're not really paying attention to what the other person has to say. And a response is a really dead giveaway to it. In monopolizing, you have two tactics to bad listening skills, which is rerouting and interrupting. Next, Brendan will be talking about selective listening and defensive listening.
My name is Brendan. I'm going to be talking about selective listening and defensive listening. First, I will talk about selective listening. Selective listening is a form of non-listening, and it involves focusing only on particular parts of communication. All listening is pretty much selective because we can't pay attention to everything around us. And we tend to screen out parts of a message that don't interest us, such as whenever a student's in class and he's not paying attention and this teacher says this will be on the test, all his attention's going to go to the teacher to pay attention to what she has to say. And it also occurs when selective listening also occurs when we reject communication that makes us uneasy. Such as if a smoker is watching TV and then one of the non-smoking ads comes on, he's just going to change the channel and not pay attention to it. And we also screen out communication that is critical of us. Like, say someone is saying, you're not that good at something, and you're just going to ignore them because you're not going to pay attention to anything that's harmful to your feelings. And we all have subjects that bore us or disturb us, yet it is unwise to listen selectively when doing so could deprive us of information or insights that could be valuable. Now, defensive listening is perceiving personal attacks or criticism or hostility in communication that is not critical or mean-spirited. Such as if someone bakes a cake for one of their friends and they're like, oh, that's so sweet, and their mom says their mom makes a cake that's way better, and then the other person just gets mad because their cake's not as good as the person's mom who made it before. And when listening defensively, we assume others don't like or trust or respect us, and we read these motives into whatever they say, no matter how innocent their communication may be. Some people are generally defensive, expecting criticism from all quarters. Like, they think anything anyone says to them will be hurtful to their feelings. And they perceive judgments in almost anything said to them. In other instances, defensive listening is confined to specific topics or vulnerable times when we judge ourselves to be inadequate. And so defensive listening can deprive us from information and insights that might be valuable, even if it's not pleasant. And now Chelsea will be coming in to talk about ambushing and literal listening.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Wilson, and I'm going to describe to you what ambush and literal listening is going to be. They're both a type of non-listening. It's kind of hard to describe because when you think of communication, you think of the talker and the listener. Well, these two forms are like not listening at all. So I'll go ahead and describe you what ambush listening is. Ambush listening is a listening carefully for the purpose of attacking the speaker. So basically what's going on is that the speaker is talking to you and you're like listening very carefully and kind of like nitpicking what they're saying. This is the purpose of like being able to spit game back at them, so you can be like, oh, well, you said this, and I'm going to take it in a literal meaning you're just going to attack the person over and over again, making the conversation non-existent. When I go to my second point, attacking, it's basically what I just described. Like, you're going to use the information that they just gave you and basically attack what they're saying and making the conversation very awkward and unuseful. My third point is defensiveness. Usually when a person is an ambush listener, they're very defensive. They're not going to be very good at listening for hard criticism. They're always going to want you to tell them the good things out of their thing. So if you're giving them hard criticism and you're being like A good example of this would be a wife talking to her husband about buying a new dress. Well, the husband's only going to listen so long and find out how much the dress is actually going to cost. And then he's going to attack her like, well, why did you spend that much money? You didn't need to do that. Like, you're beautiful how you are. You don't need to spend that much money on a new dress. So that's basically what ambush listening is. It's really straightforward. You can't really get any more literal than that. But talking about literal listening, we'll move over here and we'll talk about literal listening. Literal listening is listening only for content and ignoring the relationship level of meaning. So basically, you're listening for the information. You're not really giving it emotion. You're just kind of like, okay, I'll meet you at 3. Like, I really don't care. This communication, you're basically, like I said, listening for the literal meaning, which includes content. So you're looking for a time, date, but you might not hear like dress for cocktail appropriate or something like that. The overlook listening is overlook what's being communicated on the relationship level. So basically what I said, you're not listening for the emotional satisfaction of the conversation. You're just kind of listening for the information. No effort is insensitive to other feelings. So a person could be telling you like, he broke up with me because of A, B, and C. The person listening to your conversation isn't going to be very emotional back to you. They're not going to give you any feedback. Well, I'm sorry about that. I hope you're doing okay. Like, I'm sorry y'all just broke up. And then, like I said, they're both non-listening habits. An example of literal listening would be like you talking to a boss and saying, hey, I'm going to be out of work because I'm about to have surgery. And the person or your boss is like, well, you have a 6-day absence rule. Like, you can only be absent so many days before you get written up or you get fired. The boss didn't be very emotional back to the girl saying, well, I'm sorry you're going through surgery. I hope it goes well. Like, you're in my prayers and stuff like that. He's just kind of like, you're going to show up to work or not. So basically, that's what literal listening and ambushing is. It's not a very good type of listening. So now Christian's going to come on, and he's going to pretty much conclude the whole thing and kind of base it on real life situations.
Alright, my name is Christian, and I'm going to be concluding everything up. I'm going to reiterate some main points, and I'm going to put it in real life situations. So, in conclusion, listening is something that we do every day. People can talk all they want, but nothing will ever get accomplished or completed without proper listening skills. So, mindfulness. I'm going to reiterate, mindfulness is being fully present in the moment. So a real-world example here is in the movie Hitch. Will Smith's character says, while on a date with the girl, don't get distracted. You need to pay attention. You need to pay attention. You need to listen and respond. Important things for being mindful. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to pseudo-listening. This is pretending to listen. A perfect example of this would be a wife talking to a husband, say he's outside working in the garage on his car or whatever, and the wife goes, hey, we're going to have dinner with my parents next weekend, etc., etc., and the husband just goes, while he's working. And then it comes time for next weekend, and the husband has no idea what she's talking about. They'd be pseudo-listening. You're pretending to listen, nodding your head, engaging like you are listening, but you actually don't hear a word that they're saying. And then now I'm going to go on to monopolizing, which is continuously focusing communication on ourselves instead of listening to the person who is actually talking. So this person is always looking for a chance to interject themselves into the conversation or reroute them back into the conversation. A good example of this that I can think of would be that crazy uncle at Thanksgiving that you only see once a year. That he's just going to wait for someone to say something that would almost pertain to him, and then he'll interject his own story into the conversation, basically just taking over the dinner table. Or also another one that maybe college students can relate to is that date that only talks about themselves, and you try to get a word in, and they just shut you down. So selective listening is focusing on particular parts of communication. This is when you pick bits and pieces out of the conversation that you want to hear. Men are particularly good at this. I think all the ladies in the room can attest to that. And also here, I'm going to put my pre-med classes into use. A fun fact, selective listening is controlled by the part of the brain known as the reticular formation. A good example of this is, say there's a husband and a wife talking. The husband says, all right, I'm going to clean the gutters, then I'm going to mow the grass, and then I'll take you to the movies. All the wife heard was, I'm going to take you to the movies. Defensive listening is when you perceive personal attacks, criticism, or hostility in communication that is not critical or mean-spirited in any way. Basically, this is being butthurt. An example of this one that I can think of is say a football player on the field, he's on the line and he missed the block. The coach is going to chew him out a little bit, but then he's going to give him constructive criticism on how to fix his performance. But the player takes the criticism to heart instead of constructive criticism. Ambushing is listening carefully for the purpose of attacking the speaker. In an argument, you're waiting for the speaker to mess up, or the speaker to give a false claim, and then you exploit the speaker's mess up or that false claim for your own benefit. Then we have literal listening, which involves listening only for content and ignoring the relationship of the meaning. Now, basically, this is taking all the pathos out of the conversation and only listening for facts and main points. Most of the time, literal listening has a negative connotation to it, but I believe I've come up with an example to where it's actually a positive connotation of this type of listening. And that example would be in the military when your squad leader or a commander is giving an op order, you use literal listening to get the main points of the mission. That way you can complete it successfully. You're not really listening for pathos in that type of situation. So with that being said, this concludes Chapter 6 on mindful listening. My group hopes you've used mindful listening while we've been up here talking, otherwise we're just talking to the wall. And we also hope that we've demonstrated some new topics that you did not know so that you can go out and utilize these and be better listeners in our society. Thank you very much. And